Here I'm going to talk about the disease known as diabetes. And the first thing we have to understand is that your cells need glucose. Glucose is a very simple sugar, all right, right here, glucose, small molecule, and it needs to get into the cells, and inside the cells, the glucose is turned into ATP, and ATP powers all your proteins. So pretty much glucose is the most important thing that you can that you have in your body. It's the gasoline, more or less, or I should say maybe it's like oil, and then your mitochondria, they turn the oil into gasoline, and the gasoline powers your proteins. I think I've kind of covered that in a couple of places. But glucose is very important, and so we need to get it into the cells. Now, your body has chemical pathways to break down the food you've eaten into glucose. So you have glucose like flying around everywhere, but you've got to get it into the cells. How do you get it into the cells? Well, here is a cell, and it can be any cell in your body. No matter what it does, it's going to need glucose. So every cell pretty much has the same method of getting glucose into your body. It creates little proteins. These are actually a set of proteins. Not, it looks like one big thing, but it's actually many proteins working together. And they kind of insert themselves into the membrane, the outer membrane of the cell. And what happens is they will open up and create a little pore that allows certain things to get in. They have a certain shape in the hole, and only some molecules can get in, but not everything. So it opens up, and they try to be as specific as possible. So in this particular case, the shape is designed so when it opens up, it lets what? It lets glucose in. So this particular pore in the membrane, right? So remember, they're made out of lipids, but there are proteins sticking in there, and one group of proteins form a kind of hole to let the glucose in. And the shape of these proteins is what allows it to happen. Now, what happens is that you don't want this thing to open very often, because even though it's supposed to only let glucose in, it is a hole in the cell, and it sometimes lets things in that it shouldn't. So you need a signal. You need a certain signal for when to let this thing open up. And that signal is something called insulin. And we'll talk about how this works here in a second. But realize you don't want this thing open because it might let in poisonous chemicals besides glucose. It might let in something like viruses. So you really don't want to open this very often. You want to leave it closed. So what's the signal? You only want to open it when there's a lot of glucose around, and only at that time. And the thing that allows it to open is this chemical called insulin. Insulin is produced, and it's actually pumped out of cells in the pancreas. There are little cells in a region called the Isles of Langerhans. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you that. If you went on and you wanted to be a doctor or study medicine or be a nurse, you might need to know this, but it's also good to know because there are a lot of people with diabetes, so it'd be good to know kind of what's going on. And if you ever see Isles of Langerhans, they're the cells in the pancreas that release insulin. And insulin is a chemical it's a protein that's going to attach to another set of proteins that exist in every cell in your body. And when this chemical attaches to these proteins, so you can see these are a different looking group than this thing. This thing looks different. And these stick out on the outside of the cell, and when the insulin sticks to it, it's chemically attracted here. It's every cell in the body, and when insulin attaches, chemical changes happen here, and there's another little protein. They're really not showing it, but let's pretend there's a little protein here, and it's stuck on the inside of the cell, and it's stuck to these other proteins. And when this sticks, they all change shape, and when they change shape, this one I drew here in red no longer can attach. And so when it cannot attach, it falls off, and it goes over here, and it reattaches to this group. And when it does, this group, that's when it opens up. So this is called cell signaling. when you have something like this where some cells here, these special cells, send out a chemical message to the rest of the cells to do something, or to other cells other than the cells that released it. And so they're signaling to the cells of the body to open up their glucose pores to let glucose in, because glucose is about to appear. And you're going like, well, how do they know that? Well, these cells are in the pancreas, and the pancreas is capable of detecting the amount of sugar in your body. It talks to the stomach in a very similar way to this, and through nerves. Believe it or not, you have nerves that don't go from your brain to anything. They go from your stomach to the pancreas. You're going to go, what? Yes, there are nerves that attach the stomach to the pancreas, and there are actually sweetness taste buds in your stomach. You're thinking I'm crazy, but just like on your tongue, there are little taste buds in your stomach that activate these nerves. So when you eat sugar or anything sweet, it activates these, and they send a message to your pancreas, and your pancreas releases insulin, and this process occurs. So this is kind of funny. Now, you eat things that are sweet that actually can't be broken down into glucose. Artificial sweeteners, for instance. So if you drink a Diet Coke, for instance, you taste sweetness, well, so does your stomach, and your stomach sends out this message, and this message tells your pancreas to release insulin. So you release insulin, and you release this thing, and you open this up when you drink a Diet Coke. But there's no glucose to be found because you didn't eat any sugar and break it down. And it's about a 20-minute delay, which is just about the time you need to break down food, simple sugars, into glucose. But they never appear when you drink a Diet Coke. You're not able to turn it into glucose, and so that never occurs. And it is thought that diabetes, the disease, one of the possible causes of diabetes is the fact that you drink a Diet Coke or other diet foods, and then there's no glucose available. Your body has a funny way of, if you don't use it, you kind of shut it down. Well, in this case, if it's giving me the wrong indicators, it shuts it down. And it may be that there's a considerable amount of proof that drinking Diet Cokes, which I drink a lot of them, causes this system to break down. Somehow, let's see, this system, when it attaches and you've been drinking diet things, your cells tend to just ignore the insulin signal. So you may release the insulin, but you just ignore it because you know there's nothing coming. The Diet Coke, it was a Diet Coke, so you stop ever using these pores. And of course, you have to have these, or at least you have to eat huge amounts of sweets to get it to open. And then when it does, you've eaten so many sweets, you get overwhelmed and you get too much glucose coming into the cell, and it causes it to be toxic. So the idea here is anything that affects this system is actually called diabetes. Now, you can be born with diabetes, and that's when you make insulin wrong. But actually, there are many forms of diabetes. Any of these proteins along this system, any of these or any of these here, if they are malfunctioning, you will get diabetes. And then that has nothing to do with the signal from the stomach to the pancreas. What if the taste buds are made wrong? There are so many different types of diabetes we now realize, and so many things that could be mutated, so many genes that might alter, that because there's so many genes needed for this system to work. The ones that you have genes that make these proteins, genes that make these proteins, genes that make the insulin, genes that have to do with the receptors in the stomach. There's just so many parts to this system that it's very easy to get diabetes, is what I'm saying. But you'll need to know about this disease on the test. Okay? Be able to kind of, in a general way, describe it.